As Dave mentioned, my name is Tom. I'm from St. Mary's in Uxbridge. The only correction, that's amazing that you can remember all of those things, but I've been the pastor for 11 years. Just so, don't tell the bishops, because it means next year it's time for transfer. Maybe, I hope. At St. Mary's in Uxbridge, where I'm the pastor, we have a school called Our Lady of the Valley School. And the school is one of my favorite things about ministry as a priest. And I love to go and visit the classrooms as much as I can, particularly at the beginning of the school year. And I love the little ones, because you just never know what they're going to say. So I walked into kindergarten at the beginning of this school year, and all the little ones, they're sitting on their carpet square in their own place and trying to touch one another. And I could see them like whispering back and forth as I walked into the classroom. And I heard one little boy say to the other one, this is a true story, he said, well, who's that guy? And his friend kind of hit him as if, he should know. He's like, that's Jesus, dummy. In case you're mistaken, I am not Jesus. But I come to prepare the way for Jesus, much like John the Baptist. What I thought I'd do at the very beginning of our time together is just kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what I hope to do and to accomplish with all of you today. This is great. I've never had one of these. This is some of this might be a repetition for some of you in terms of if you've attended any of these in the past. But one of the things that I think we really need to talk about, if we're going to talk about effective ministry in our parishes, is having and forming a vision. Again, for some of you, that might be repetition, but I don't think we can hit on that enough, because vision is really what drives the ministry in our parishes. And it's so important that each of us have not only a clear understanding of what Jesus entrusted to us as his mission, but also that we understand and see how our parishes fit into the mission that Jesus has entrusted to the church. There's a wonderful saying that says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And how difficult it is when we within our own parishes don't share a common vision, and how we can, if we don't share a common vision, work against one another sometimes. So we're going to talk a little about forming a vision, and then how we win others to that vision. It's great that I have a vision for St. Mary's Parish, and it's great that Diane, who's my pastoral associate, who's going to be doing some of the presenting with me this morning, that she understands what that vision is for our parish, and that many of our leaders in our parish understand what that vision is. But how far does that cascade in our parish life? If I were to go to my third grade religious education teacher on Sunday morning and ask them, what is the vision for this parish? Will they have any understanding? And how much do I invest in making sure that each person on our team involved in ministry in our parish understands what that vision is? So we have to know and talk about how can we win others to it, and I want to make that really practical in our time today. The theme, the overarching theme for our time together is really moving from a need-based ministry to strength-based ministry. And the idea behind that is that when we begin to focus on people's gifts, and we take the time to discern gifts and talents of each individual, each volunteer in our parish, while it's more work, and while it takes more time, it's actually beneficial in the long run. Right? When we begin to focus on people's gifts, talents, and abilities, we can say it's good for them because they're taking the gift that God has given them and using it to the fullest potential. But it's also good for the ministry that they serve, which is good for our parishes, and it's good for the church and its mission. Okay, so we're going to focus a little bit on that. And then finally, I want us to talk about the role of prayer. And here's the thing. All of us work in the church, and I think at some point we all recognize the importance of the role of prayer, and yet it often gets put on the back burner. what we want to do is we want to say prayer is the most important thing that we do in our life and ministry, and Diane and I are going to talk a little bit about how that came sort of to the forefront in our own knowledge. But the importance of prayer is something that we often want to skip in order to get to the next step. And I want to say, when I was talking with Dave about what we'd be doing today, I said, well, here's some of my ideas of what I'd like to talk about. And he's like, that's great. But we also want to make sure that we really talk about how we build up and get more volunteers for our parish ministries. Right? How many, by show of hands, have ministries with too many volunteers? I just have so many, I just want to send them to the neighboring parish. That's typically not the experience of us in parish life. It's not the experience in my parish. We're always in need of more volunteers. And sometimes what we want to do is we want to just take the easy road and say, oh, well, okay, if I feed them or if I guilt them, then we'll have all the volunteers that we need. These steps, these things that we'll be talking about during our time together, are really aimed toward building up leaders within our parish. And sorry, you can't skip the steps. I wish you could, you just can't. I have parishioners in my parish, they often say to me, no one can say no to Father Nick. I love that. No one can say no to Father Nick. So the temptation for me is just to want to go up to someone and say, well, I've got this need, you're available, I know you're not going to say no to me, we're going to put you into that spot. That's easy to do. The more effective thing is for me to approach a person that I've discerned has gifts that I think would be really useful for that particular position in the parish, and to have that conversation with them that says, hey, I recognize this gift in you, I want to develop that gift in you, I think God is calling you to use that gift, will you give this a chance? Right? It's easier for me to say, hey, go do this. And by God, I do it. It's great. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. So we don't want to skip any of these steps when we talk about how do we build leaders within our parish, build up our core group of volunteers for our parish. So the first thing, we're going to talk about forming a vision. This example may be completely unique to me and to no one else, but see if this sounds familiar to you. I was a new pastor coming into St. Mary's in Uxbridge in 2013. And when I arrived at the parish, I had all sorts of ideas and visions for what this parish could be. And I found my people. And I gathered this core group of people with me, Diane being among them. And we began doing everything. Everything that came down the pike, we did. It was ministry after event, after presentation. And you know what? We had really great success. People were coming to all of the things that we were offering. We were having a great time for about a year. And then we realized that I was absolutely exhausted. And Diane was exhausted. And that core group of people that I had gathered around me, they were all exhausted. We were doing so much ministry, but we had no real cohesive idea of why we were doing it. We didn't have a vision to which we were directing all of our work and all of our efforts. And so it was absolutely exhausting. We began to realize from that moment that we really needed to be more intentional about the things that we were doing. And not only did we need to be more intentional about those things that we were doing, but that we also needed more people to help us do it. And it was from that experience as a brand new pastor in Uxbridge, with my team of people gathered around me, that we began to work on forming a vision. Now, vision, I think, is exciting because it gives us that permission to dream. Now, in 2021, I was asked to do what at the time I thought was impossible, which was my bishop called, which is always the first sign of despair. My bishop called and said, "Can I see you in the office?" I went into the office. He said to me, "I'm going to make you the pastor of 2 additional parishes, one to the north and one to the south. But I'm going to give you an assistant pastor." I said, "Okay, I can handle that." And then a few weeks later, he called and he said, "Can I see you in my office again?" I said, "Well, what could it possibly be?" So I went to the office and he said, "We had a sudden death of a pastor in another neighboring parish. We're going to give you another parish. We're going to give you another associate." Okay, so it's going to be me, 2 priests, 4 parishes, partridge in a pear tree. Then he called me a 3rd time. He said, "I need to see you in the office." He said, "Since you're already going to be pastor of 4 parishes with 2 assistants, there's a 5th parish in that area that I think I'd like for you to work with to build a new vision for parish merger revitalization." Okay. So from that moment, I began working with 5 parishes, with representatives from each of those parishes, to try to create a new vision for vital parish life in what we call the Blackstone Valley region of the Diocese of Worcester. The very first thing that we did after trying was we had a mini retreat, not unlike the day is today. And we asked all the teams of representatives from each of the 5 parishes to come to pray and to dream. We didn't ask them during our time together, "What's the current state of affairs in your parish? How are things working right now?" The whole purpose of our gathering for that first initial meeting was to give them the permission to dream of a future for the church in our region. It took all of the pressure off because now everyone was beginning to think, imagine a parish in which the pews are packed with faithful worshiping parishioners. Imagine a parish where the sacramental life was primary in the lives of families. Imagine youth ministry that was really growing disciples, young disciples, who are passionate about their faith, going out to serve the Lord and to serve one another. Imagine religious education, where you had lists of people who wanted to use their talents to come and to teach, and that the true faith was being handed on in those classrooms to those students, and on and on and on. It was simply about giving them permission to dream. And it was one of the most exciting and the best possible beginnings of a very difficult process that I could have imagined. So what is a vision? A vision is simply this. A vision is a picture of the future that produces passion. It's a vision of the future that produces passion. I often describe it, and others have described it much like this. Vision is the thing that keeps me up at night. It's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. It's the thing I dream about, and then I get up and I'm ready to go. And it will keep me up at night working late. But notice what vision is not. Vision is not descriptive of where we are now. It's aspirational. It's where we want to be. How many of you in your parishes have already a clearly defined vision? Parishes. Sometimes it's hard for people involved in ministry to say, well, that's great, Father Nick, this is an amazing idea. Vision sounds very encouraging, but it's not really for me to set that. That's really for the pastor to set the vision for his parish. And while that is largely true, that doesn't mean that our ministry does not have a vision. How many in your ministry have a clearly defined vision that you could articulate? That's great. That's wonderful. And hopefully, the more we do this kind of work and this kind of thinking, we'll not only be able to have a vision, but we'll be able to articulate it, and that others with whom we mentor and work will also be able to catch the vision and articulate it as well. We want to have some discussions, and instead of just putting them all at the end in one sort of big block of discussion, we're going to have like some smaller, say 5-minute discussions as throughout the presentation. But this is the first discussion that I'd like for you to have at your tables with the people with whom you are seated. Right? Just 2 questions. What do you love about your parish or about your ministry? And then the second question is, what drives you crazy about your parish or your ministry? And the reason we ask that is because sometimes we have to back into vision, which means sometimes we can go about it by recognizing what absolutely drives us nuts about ministry. Right? So while I recognize we could probably come up with lists for both of these, maybe limit yourselves to 2, but let's have about 5 or so minutes conversation at your table. What do you love about your parish, and what drives you crazy about it? How do we win other people to that vision? It's one thing for me to have a vision, it's another thing for you to have a vision, it's another thing entirely for the volunteers in our parishes and parish ministry leaders to have a vision. Imagine for a moment 4 people out in the lake. What's the name of that lake? Long Pond? Okay. Imagine 4 people in a canoe out in Long Pond. They each have their oars, they're ready to go, and you just tell them to start rowing. And one decides that they want to go across to the other side, one who's scared wants to come back on shore, another one wants to see how long Long Pond actually is, and all of a sudden they start rowing in their own direction. Are they all rowing? Yes. But they're actually fighting against one another because they don't have a common idea of where they desire to go. But imagine if there was some captain in that boat, that canoe, that mighty canoe along the Long Pond, that was telling them and pointing them in the direction and making sure that they were taking strokes at the same moment. Imagine how much more quickly they will get to their destination when they're all rowing together. It's the same thing with a vision. So it's great that all different people can have different visions for their parish, but there has to be some kind of unanimity in that vision in order for us to get where we desire to go. If there are 2 visions in a parish, say the pastor's vision and your vision, then there's no longer vision, but there's now division. And division can be deadly in a parish. I think it's essential that each one of us are able to verbally express the vision. And we can hold it in our minds, but can we actually articulate it not only for ourselves, but to others? When I was at the end of my first year as pastor at St. Mary's, I did a homily that was a little bit like the State of the Parish address. And one of the things that I asked during that homily was that every parish ministry leader be able to answer for me one essential question. And the question was this: how does this, whatever it is your ministry is involved in, how does this make disciples? How does this car wash make disciples? How does the prayer shawl ministry make disciples? How does the youth ministry paintball trip make disciples? And the point that I was making isn't to say that we need to stop doing those things. I wasn't making the point that we need to stop having car washes or paintball trips or prayer shawl ministry. But rather to recognize that in whatever it is that we do in our parish, it all has to be directed toward the mission given to us by Christ, which was making disciples. And I think you can come up with good answers as to how those things contribute in the process of making disciples. But it was more important that not that I could describe or explain, but that the ministry leaders could describe and explain how what they were doing was part of the mission entrusted to us by Jesus. Think about the ministries with which you work most closely. If you were to go up to any one of the people who are serving in your ministry, and you were to ask them that question, how does this make disciples? Do you think they'd be able to answer? Honestly. Some? This might be the controversial statement of the day. I did away with parish council at the parish. Now, before you think I'm some sort of tyrant, we replaced it with something called a vision team. Right? So these are parishioners that I knew understood what Jesus entrusted to us as a church. They were the ones to help me to formulate a vision for the parish. So we meet more regularly than the parish council. But we got away from that idea of parish council. And one of the main reasons was this. After about a year on parish council, I asked my representatives at the table, why does the church exist? And not one of them could answer. And I said, I think that's a little bit dangerous for us to be the ones sort of representing the parish as leaders of the parish, and we can't even express what it is that Jesus entrusted to us to do. And so I said, time out. We're done doing parish council for a while. We're just going to take the next several weeks and we're going to learn a little bit. We're going to read, we're going to pray, we're going to ask that question, what is it that Jesus has entrusted us to do? And then once we understand what Jesus entrusted us to do, then we begin to form that vision. Okay? But the idea was everyone had to be on the same page. Everyone had to understand and be able to articulate it themselves. And how could we expect others to articulate it if we ourselves don't know how to articulate that kind of vision? So how do we communicate this kind of vision? Oh, first, before we get to that, this is one of my favorite images. I ripped it off completely from Divine Renovation, so I'm just going to give that little caveat. But it's called the Rogers Innovation Adoption Curve. We often think that if we need to present our vision to the parish, we need to get everyone on board all at once. And sometimes we feel like maybe the best way to do that is just having big convocations. We're just going to get everyone at one fell swoop. It often doesn't spread like that. The Rogers Innovative Adoption Curve says that if you work on winning over some of your early innovators, those are people who like to dream with you. They got really excited about having a vision. They can begin to imagine parishes that you've been describing, and they're totally in. They're the first ones to say, Father, or if you're the ministry leader, I want what you're selling. Those are your innovators. And then they went over this other group called the early adopters. Those early adopters, they're the ones that if you give them a good reason, right, you have a well-laid plan, right, they're going to go along with you. They're in, they're excited, they're going to go along with you. If you went over this group, the 16%, the rest of the people will join you. The majority of the people will join you, I should say. both the early majority and the late majority, they're going to be won over simply because you have gathered around yourself a group of very motivated, mission-driven, visional people. You're going to win over your early adopters and then your late adopters, and then there's here the laggards, the poor 16% laggards. Even if Jesus came, they're not going to come along with it at all. They're going to oppose you no matter what. They're going to oppose a vision no matter what. Honestly, don't spend all of your energy on the laggards. That's our temptation, right? We want everyone to be on board. There are some people who will never be on board, but why are they getting all of our best attention? We put our attention here, in your innovators and your early adopters, and you're going to win over most of your parish with this new vision that you're presenting. So I like that. I like that. I also have found it to be very, very true in parish life and ministry. How do we communicate vision? Let's talk about some practicalities. If you are a priest or you are a deacon, homilies are your go-to, largely because when do we see the majority of our people in our parish? On Sunday at Mass. That's when they're there, they're a captive audience, and we can do some good work in communicating vision and drawing people their attention to the mission entrusted to us by Christ through our homilies. I've had a deacon at my parish since I've been assigned pastor, and we used to do a thing that was, we called it the 1-2 punch. I'd start one weekend preaching all the homilies on a visional topic, and then he'd follow it up the following weekend with a visional homily that dovetailed nicely with it. Right? It's how over a period of time we were able to at least share with our parish a vision that was exciting. Again, that's limited to priests and deacons. So what else can we do? If you're involved in parish life and ministry, consider having a leadership forum. It doesn't have to be elaborate as today's event, but within our parishes, we do have the opportunity to gather with ministry leaders and to share with them some topics that are essential to the vision of our parish. This could be a breakfast with a talk that follows. We hosted, particularly during the time in which we were going through periods of parish renewal, we hosted a number of lunches that people would come, we'd have lunch, we'd have some table discussion and some sort of keynote, but it was an opportunity to gather with our ministry leaders. Each year in our parish, we have a 40 hours devotion during the season of Advent. And we found that the 40 hours devotion was a great opportunity for us to meet with our parish ministry leaders because we asked ministries to sponsor each hour of the 40 hours devotion. So a different ministry would sponsor, and members of that ministry would come and pray and be before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament during that 40 hours time. But leading up to the 40 hours, because we were going to be asking that of our ministries, it was a good opportunity for us to just check in with them to see how things were going, how we could better support them. And really, Diane, who's my pastoral associate, her main task as a pastoral associate in our parish is supporting ministries. So leadership forums are kind of a good way just to touch base with our ministry leaders. Regular support meetings with your leaders. If you're a pastor or if you are the head of a particular ministry, I would really encourage you to consider having regular check-ins with your leaders. When I meet with my leaders, these are not hour-long meetings, but rather these are meetings that are held. I schedule them for half an hour. They're sometimes 15 or 20 minutes. And I ask 3 questions whenever I meet with my ministry leaders or the people with whom I directly support. I ask them what's going well, what's not going well, and how can I support you? Notice what I don't ask. I do not ask, How can I do this for you? I've got enough to do. And the people who are the leaders in my parish, they have all the gifts that are needed to do well in their ministry. My job is to support them. For those of you who are ministry leaders, and you have others in your ministry that are responsible to you, it is not your job to do it for them, but rather to support them so that they can do their jobs well. Now, if you have 45 people that are responsible to you in a ministry, there's no possible way that you can have those conversations with all of them. Right? I'm the pastor of the parish. I directly support 4 people. And so I meet with those 4 people, and I have this kind of support meeting conversation. Now, Diane, she has a different task because she directs all of the ministry heads. There are, 47, 48 ministries? Okay. So there are 48 ministry leaders. Diane can't possibly have a one-on-one with each one of them, but she has her own way of breaking it up and have these kinds of meeting conversations so that we can see where our people are, what they're struggling with, and how we can support them better. So, as we talked a little bit about the importance of having unanimity of vision, a shared vision, communicating that vision, I want you to ask yourselves and talk at your groups about this. Number 1, can you articulate the purpose of your ministry and how it serves the church's mission? And number 2, do you think your volunteers could articulate that purpose and how it serves the church's mission? Then perhaps another addition, I don't have it here on the slide, but another addition might be, how might you better help the people that are responsible to you to understand the vision? So let's take 5-10 minutes to talk about that. So there's a question that was, when did we make a shift from mission to vision? The mission is what Jesus entrusted to us. It comes before he ascends to heaven. He takes one last opportunity to speak to his disciples. He tells them, go make disciples of all nations, baptize them, teach them. Now there's one hinged verb in what Jesus commanded in that passage from Scripture. For many people, they would think the missional verb is the go. The hinged verb of that verse is actually make disciples. It's the making of disciples. The going is about making disciples. The baptizing is about making them disciples. The teaching is about making them disciples. That we just have to have clear in our mind. Then when we begin to articulate a vision for our parish, it's not that the vision is the same as the mission, but the vision is directed toward that mission. Does that make sense? Right? Purpose. Sometimes, this is how I like to think about it this way. Think of it as, what is your purpose? Your purpose statement. And for St. Mary's, we actually focus much more on the word purpose than we do, say, mission or something like that, or even vision, right? Our purpose is to form disciples who joyfully live out the mission of Jesus. That's our vision. That's our purpose. I will say, I asked that question quite often when I was at one of these conferences with Divine Renovation, and they said, it's the same. Same. But you have to have a clear understanding of the mission that Jesus entrusted to his church when you begin to articulate a vision for your parish. One of the things I neglected to mention, but I think is actually helpful regarding how we articulate a vision to our parishioners, this is something that comes from Life Team. Does anyone use Life Team? So Life Team, they have an interesting approach to their ministry with young people, and they break it up as to a third, a third, and a third. A third of their time is spent ministering to young people. A third of their time is spent ministering to their parents. And a third of their time is spent ministering to their mentors in their program. And while I'm not saying that you should be using Life Team or that everyone has to have that exact model, what I appreciate about what Life Team was expressing is that in our ministries, we have to make sure that we're addressing all of our constituent groups. Right? So they take the time to make sure that they're ministering to their mentors and to their parents who they know are influential over their teens. Right? The same thing with us, right? Our ministry might be concerned with, say, catechesis of young people, but how much time do we, as leaders in our ministry, actually take time to support those who are catechists in the classrooms or the parents of the children in our classrooms, just as way of example. Are there any other questions before we continue on? Yes?
Could you just repeat your purpose at your church?
Sure.
Please.
Our purpose is to form disciples who joyfully live out the mission of Jesus. That's what we're about. Sure. Our purpose is to form disciples who joyfully live out the mission of Jesus. Can I tell you something? A little secret? We copied it from somewhere else. And I have no qualms about that. It was, as we were discussing it in our vision team, it's what produced the most excitement within us. When we started to touch upon this example, when we came across this example of a purpose, of a vision, we became so excited in our conversations that we said we couldn't imagine creating something better ourselves. And if the passion was already there, swipe with enthusiasm, downright steel. It's all about the mission, right? We're all on the same team, striving toward the same goal. So if you find something that works for you and for your parish, feel free to steal away. Yes?
What does forming look like?
The question is, what does forming look like? It's a very good question. I would say we harp upon certain pillars within our parish that really help us to form disciples. One is, the most important, is prayer and the sacramental life of the church. So we're joyfully committed to worship. Building community is huge, and I noticed that there's a small group breakout after lunch on the importance of small groups within parishes. I'm not sure if any of you read, there was an article in America Magazine a few months ago, could be a year ago even at this point, but it was about the largest parish in the United States, which is in North Carolina. I think it's North Carolina? North Carolina. And they have, I don't know, 15,000 families or something like that. Some unbelievable number for us in New England, we can't have our mind around it. And they said, how do you create community, parish life, family in a parish that's so large? And they said it all came down to the ability to form small communities of faith. So in our parish, we have a number of opportunities for people to participate in small groups, whether that be that's based on prayer or based on, we have an evangelization tool in our parish called Light of the World, and we have about 10 or 12 ongoing small groups that meet regularly in people's homes. And we're in the process, through the influence of Everett Fritz, who I believe presented here in this fall, we're in the process of moving our youth ministry in the model of small group ministry. So worship, community, ongoing formation. Right? How often do we say that religious education doesn't stop at confirmation, but rather we grow in our intellectual knowledge and love of the Lord throughout our lives? And one of the big successes that we've had in our parish is a huge or an ongoing and growing group of adults who are committed to ongoing formation. It started with something as simple as Bishop Robert Barron's Catholicism series, which I still think is the best video series available. And we had a group of people go through that, and we started offering other things. Essential Press has some wonderful video-based programs and all that stuff. What we began to realize is the same people had come for so long that there were no more videos that we could show them, and they were beginning to ask really difficult and good questions about their faith, and we realized they needed something more. And when we realized they needed something more, we began what we call St. Mary's University of Uxbridge, which is, they're quite frankly college-style courses offered for our parishioners. So it began because I was asked to teach at Anna Maria College for a semester on ecclesiology, and I said, okay, but I've never taught before in my life. So I need a group of guinea pigs. So I gathered a group of adults from the parish, and we had 30 adults come and take my course at the parish before I taught it at Anna Maria College. We've had professors from Assumption University, from College of the Holy Cross, and other priests within our diocese that have the requisite degrees. They've come and offered courses. I knew that we were really onto something after all these years when I decided that, at the request of some parishioners, I offered a 4-week mini course on the book of Revelation, simply because I wanted people to stop calling it Revelations. So I offered a 4-week mini course on the book of Revelation, and we had 85 people come for a 4-week course. And they continue to come. Everything we offer, they continue to do. So now we run 2 tracks. We almost have like the beginner track, for those who are just kind of dabbling and just kind of getting back to the basics. And then we have the advanced track for those who really want more, say, theology than catechesis. So I think that ongoing formation is important, and it's not just catechetical, but also just in our lives of faith. The development of ministry, so that's number 4. This is how we in our parish form disciples. Number 4 is just offering ministries that people can use their gifts, which is what today is all about, to serve the Lord and one another. And then finally, yes, you have a question?
I think it's important to say that this doesn't happen.
No, oh gosh. So that's very good. So this does not happen overnight, and also let me just say as a brief caveat, it's not like we're doing it perfectly, right? We're works in progress. This is what we're striving towards.
To get some beginning tools, if you're at that point, where to evaluate the parish and see where you are at, and how you can build from where you are.
Sure, and I'll tell you exactly how it began at St. Mary's in Uxbridge. It began with Light of the World Evangelization Ministry. Some parishes use something called Alpha. Some use Christ Life. There are a number of different evangelization opportunities and tools that can be used in parishes. For us, we just happened to find that we struck gold with Light of the World. It's not to say it's what every parish will use, but it was what we used. And we began it in the fall of 2014, and we have had 2 evangelization retreats for parishioners every year for the last 10 years, or 9 years, I guess. We're going on our 10th year. 300 to 400 parishioners of our parish have participated in Light of the World retreats. But here's the thing about Light of the World retreats. The retreat is not really what it's all about. The retreat, I say it's like eating a meal in reverse. The retreat was kind of like having your dessert. What happens following that retreat is that people then begin to form small communities of faith that meet regularly for study, for prayer, for fellowship. And that's the meat and the potatoes. That's how the faith among these adults is continuing to be nurtured and to grow, which is why we have so many people participating in ongoing formation opportunities, so forth and so on. So for us, like you said, what the starting point was for us, the catalyst, was Light of the World evangelization ministry. Why did I choose Light of the World? This is not an advertisement for Light of the World, although I will tell you, as a full disclosure, I am on the board of directors. But Light of the World, the focus is actually taking your people who are already in your pews, who maybe are lukewarm, maybe they've been, they go through the motions but aren't necessarily on fire, and does a tremendous job of getting them in touch with the very charismatic message of the gospel that God loves us, we've fallen through sin, Christ has redeemed us, and has given us the Holy Spirit. That basic kind of message. And it takes lukewarm people, and by the power of the Holy Spirit, sets them on fire. And once they're on fire, they're looking for these opportunities. And that's why St. Mary's had to, kind of come up with all this stuff. We had all these people who were now getting on fire and needed opportunities to grow in their faith. Alpha does something similar, although I think that their starting point is those who aren't even in your pews yet, which is also a deep need for our church. But I agree, there needs to be some sort of starting point. Which brings me to actually the fifth pillar. How do we make disciples in our parishes? Evangelization. We have to be very intentional about our desire to make disciples for Christ. And however it is that we choose to go about that, however the Lord leads us to go about that, I think we just have to respond and listen. Again, for us, Light of the World was the key. And it continues to be the most impactful thing that we've done in our parish. So just to recap, those 5 things. How we make disciples by our commitment to worship, ongoing formation, community, ministry, and evangelization. It's a very long answer to a very short question. Okay, let's move on to our final, our second to last, I guess, segment. How do we move from having a need-based ministry, meaning, okay, we need a 3rd grade teacher, to a strength-based ministry and saying, hey, this person really has gifts for teaching and catechesis, let's foster that gift so that they can become effective teachers. How do we do that? I do want to speak practically about that. I think what we need are fact people. We need to identify the fact people. Fact. People who are faithful to the church's teachings. People who are available. There are some people that are so overcommitted that they, although good-natured and well-intentioned, they simply do not have the time to give to the ministry that you are inviting. We have a wonderful priest in our parish. Every year, he commits to being a mentor in youth ministry. And every year, we have to find replacements for him because he's never able to come. He's just not available. He really wants to be, but he's not able to commit in the way in which is necessary. This has a negative connotation these days, but I'm going to use it in a very positive connotation. We need people who are contagious. We need people who are influencers, who are fun, who are joyful, who can be real leaders in our ministries. Now, we also have to be very careful when we talk about contagious people, because there are also people who are contagious for all of the wrong reasons, right? They're the gossipers. They're the people who they kind of have like their own cliques of people to the exclusion of others. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Contagious people, if they can be harnessed well, can really bring ministry in our parishes to life, but they can also kill our ministries. So we have to really be discerning about who is contagious and who's being invited into ministry. Because you really don't want them to be a toxic presence for us. We want them to be a life-giving presence for us. And finally, we need people who are teachable. Every single person can grow in their ability to be a leader. And even those of us who are in leadership positions, we continue to grow as leaders. As I said just a minute ago, I do not have all the answers. This is something that we continue to tweak and something that we can continue to develop and continue to discern throughout the life of our parish. Right? So each of our volunteers, they really need to show this kind of humility that allows them to learn. Right? Now, so those are the four criteria, I think, if we really want to get more people into our ministries. Are they faithful, available, contagious, and teachable? Which one of these do we tend to rely on more than all the others? Yeah, available. We rely on the available people, right? And I totally get it. I keep on going back to my third grade example. I totally get it, right? You have a group of 27 third graders on Sunday mornings who are coming for religious education, and their teacher is no longer able to teach. I have a need for a third grade catechist. So I'm going to take any able body who's willing to teach, and I'm going to throw them to the wolves. Have you ever tried to teach religious education? It is hard. How many of you are catechists or in religious ed? God bless you. You all deserve ministry medals. Teaching is a vocation. And just imagine how much more effective it would be if we actually developed the gifts and the talents of someone that we recognize could be an effective teacher. We have a wonderful family in our parish, the Colinaro family. And their father, Randy, he's one of those very professional types. You know, he has a job with an investment banking firm and all this kind of stuff. And he's very committed to his family, he's very committed to his children and their schooling and to our parish. And we recognized in Randy certain gifts that we thought might be well used in junior high ministry. Talk about, now that's, third grade is one thing, junior high is a whole other piece. So we went to Randy and we had a conversation with him and we said, you know, we think you'd be really good at this. We want to support you. And he demonstrated all of these abilities and decided that he would teach the 7th grade religious education class. There has been a complete transformation, not only in our junior high religious education classroom, but also in Randy, who now his favorite thing to do is to teach in junior high ministry. And that's not to my credit, that's entirely to the credit of our director of catechesis at the parish. Her name is Mary Beth. And Mary Beth, who recognized in Randy these gifts, and went and had a conversation with him, and met with him, and continued to develop that gift. Was it as easy as just picking on your available person and putting them in the classroom? No, it took more work. But is the payoff worth it? Absolutely. The payoff was absolutely worth it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn over the presentation for a little bit to Diane, who again, in her capacity as pastoral associate, really is tasked with working with ministry leaders and helping to develop gifts and talents of our ministry leaders. And then when she's finished, I'm going to come back out.
So Father asked me to give a few examples of people in the parish that have come forward because we recognize their gifts. And my job as he mentioned, is to oversee ministries, support ministry leaders, and even help develop and launch new ministries. So the question I know is, how do we grow volunteers? How do we, rather than just plug a gap, focus on their gifts and utilize them in proper ministries? The Catechism tells us that there are gifts, gifts of the Holy Spirit. Okay. Some of the gifts are given to us to keep and help transform our hearts so that we in turn can make ourselves more Christ-like. Other gifts are given to us to help spread Christ's love and bring, help to build up the kingdom of God. And when people use their gifts effectively, other people will benefit. When you think about it, you may have a gift that somebody else needs, and if you're not sharing your gift, they're losing out. The same happens for you. If they're not willing to share their God-given gift, you may be losing out. So how do we tap into these charisms or gifts? I find for myself, and I know Father also, we weren't like this in the beginning. This is just taking years prior. But we begin with prayer. We begin with prayer for the church, for ourselves. We can't give what we don't have. So if we aren't participating in an active prayer life, we probably won't be able to see the gifts in others. We work to develop those personal relationships with others. I know that's been mentioned. Oftentimes people come forward and say they'd like to volunteer, they don't know what to do. I need to spend time with them. I need to sit with them and talk with them, listen to their faith story, let them hear what their faith life is like. And in that way, I begin to recognize certain things in them. They begin to recognize the gifts in themselves. We take that time to develop a relationship, have those conversations, let them witness their faith story. We can see what they get excited about. When you're talking with someone and they start sharing what they like to do, what they've done in the past that they enjoy, you begin to feel that. You can feel their heart. You can see that excitement in their eyes. And I, in turn, get excited. And together, we can kind of forge a new path for them. Let them know that you're going to be there to support them. I find that's really important. Some people, they seem to be afraid to come forward and volunteer in the church. So let them know that you're there. Extend that invite, extend that hospitality to them. And don't be too hard on yourself. It can take time to develop those relationships. It's not uncommon to meet with someone 3 or 4 times before they make the decision to take that leap and step into a new ministry that they haven't tried. So how do we know if we are using our charisms for the good of the kingdom? Okay. One, it will energize you and bring you peace and joy. I'm sure we've all had that experience where we've worked on something, had an event, done something that turned out really well, and you just feel so excited that you're willing to jump in and do it again. Okay. You will have effective and successful results. If you're in the right ministry, doing what God has called you to do, using your gifts as He's given them to you, you will be effective. And the beauty is that others will directly or indirectly recognize your gift. They may say, wow, you did a fantastic job on that. You may not even realize that what you were doing impacted so many others. So I'm just going to briefly share 2 examples of ministries and people involved in ministry that we spent time with. So here we have a picture. I'm going to talk first about the families over here. Our family ministry has just blossomed in the past 1.5 years at our parish. Both of those young ladies came to us through RCIA, Julia and Aaliyah. Aaliyah's on the right. I met her first, and we just started having conversations at the parish. She'd come to donut ministry. She became married and had a baby, and then she started joining us at playgroup. And through conversations, she would say things like, gosh, I wish we had a family ministry here. And I'm thinking, gosh, I wish we did too. But Eventually, we had the conversation where I think you'd be really good at heading that up, and she began to take that on. And through other events that Family Ministry sponsored, she was able to meet other families. And Julia stepped forward and said, I would love to help you with Family Ministry. She understood the mission through some encouragement, through sharing of gifts. They became very involved in the parish. All the young families started sitting together at 9 o'clock Mass. They were very proactive. They were going out and meeting other families at Mass, inviting them. Before you know it, they have this huge area in the back of the church with all the young families. We started calling it the neighborhood because it was full of families and young children. It was just great. They, of course, were sitting back there like most young moms and dads thinking these kids are bothering everybody. We assured them they weren't. Slowly, the neighborhood began to move forward. Now the neighborhood is down front at 9 o'clock Mass. Father says, wow, there's a lot of kids there. They're very noisy. He said, be careful what you wish for. We revamped our playgroup. I met with them last summer. We now call it the Tiny Disciples. We're much more faith-based. We invited older women to come be part of the ministry, so they come to hold babies. That's what they want to do. They help. We have moms who used to be preschool teachers. They are now setting up centers for these kids. It's a beautiful thing every Tuesday morning. And so much fruit has come from this. New baptisms, new friendships, and even conversions. Next, we'll talk about Jared and Abigail. We met them at the pandemic. We were online with a young adult ministry. We had 4 college students, and through inviting them to different things, we got to know them more. They are now heading the young adult Bible study. They work on a confirmation program, and they are just fantastic. He's a Catholic counselor who works out of our parish now 1 day a week, and they just couldn't be better for our parish. They are now pregnant and looking forward to joining Family Ministry. So how do you know how to look for people's gifts? Well, there's such things as Sherry Riddell's Called and Gifted program. Cleveland Diocese has a spiritual inventory. But just to wrap it up, because I know Father needs to finish up, take the time for the personal conversations. Listen to their faith stories. People are excited. You need to find that excitement. It will make you excited. Offer encouragement, invite them to do more, and take the time. It will be well worth your effort. And embracing people's gifts adds so much to them. It will energize. Oops, that went the wrong way. We'll just move on. So if you get people utilizing their gifts, it's better for them. We'll draw them into a deeper relationship with Jesus. It's better for the ministry. You'll have a much more energized ministry. It's better for the church. If your people are energized and your ministries are energized, your church will be energized. And it's also better for the kingdom of God, right? Because an energized church is contagious. When people see other people who are on fire for the Lord, there's no better evangelization tool than people who are going out, sharing their love of Christ, and creating excitement in other people. Thank you.
Just a quick word about Leah and Julia, who I love. I love them, I really do. Not only did they become on board with the Family Life Ministry, that they have been really developing the Young Disciples, the Tiny Disciples playgroup, but they've also just registered through the parish's help to become certified as directors for Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, which, if you're familiar with that particular model, that comes from the Nashville Dominicans. So just a great example of 2 people who, through the process of RSCIA, became friends and are so on fire, and they continue to grow in their love for the Lord. And again, it's not us doing it, because Diane and I don't have the time to do that kind of ministry. We're busy with all the other things, but identifying the people who are, in fact, people, and giving them the permission to do it. So it's a beautiful thing. This is what Diane was talking about, calling forth others. It's just better all around, better for everyone. So, in your minds, I hope that today you will start to think about who are those fact people in your parish. Right? They're the people that you've recognized, they have particular gifts, skills, and abilities. Okay? Hold that person in your mind, and then I want you to go and have a conversation with them this week that starts off like this. I see in you a passion for young people. I see in you the potential to be a really great member of St. Vincent de Paul. Whatever it is, call out their gift. How wonderful it is when people can recognize that their gifts are being noticed within the parish. And all it takes is that conversation. I see in you this gift. And I'm going to invite you to use it. Again, is it the easiest approach? No, the easiest approach is for me at Mass on Sunday to stand up and say, I need a third grade catechist, and anyone will do. What's harder is for me to go and have a lot of one-on-one conversations. And while it's harder, the fruit is well worth it. The fruit is well worth it. I'm going to skip this next little discussion period because I want to talk about prayer before we move on. Oh, sorry, Oscar. Want me to say it again? No, just kidding. I want to say a word about prayer because, again, I think it's because it's taken for granted that we are prayers that we skip it sometimes in this process. And I think it's the most important part of the process. When I began mentioning that I had been asked to be pastor of 4 parishes and work with the 5th to bring about parish renewal and revitalization in the Blackstone Valley area of my diocese. And by the grace of God, it has been one of the most fruitful experiences in our diocese and in the life of all of the parishes involved. Our numbers are higher in terms of Mass attendance. Our collections are higher. There are new ministries being formed regularly at both the parishes that emerged from this process of parish renewal and revitalization. And that is not typically the response that you hear in dioceses that are undergoing some kind of revitalization or merger process. Why do I think it was so important? Not only do I think that I think we did it well. We designed our own process, and I think we designed it well. But I can also tell you that we met, the representatives from each of the 5 parishes met every 2 weeks. And we met for 3 hours every 2 weeks. And the first hour was in Eucharistic adoration. So if you think about that, a third of our time was spent before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. And people would ask me quite regularly, is that where you got the idea for the renewal revitalization process? And I said, no. And they said, well, did God communicate with you somehow during that time? And I said, I'm sure he did, but I was not aware of it at the moment. They were the worst hours of prayer I've ever spent because my mind, as the pastor leading this process, was spiraling out of control with thoughts, ideas, anxious concerns, worries, whatever the case may be. But I have to believe that the fact that we pumped ourselves down as teams of people before the Blessed Sacrament, before we began to meet, was entirely the reason for our success. We've been talking a lot about all the practical things that we can do to grow groups of volunteers for our parish, how we can begin to think about vision for our parish, but it's got to begin with prayer. It's got to begin with our imploring the Lord for his goodness and grace, and then have confidence that God will follow through. Sometimes I think we just need a little bit more confidence that God can in fact work when we give him that space to work. In our parish, a number of our most successful efforts began because we asked for intercessory prayer groups. Our vocations ministry began with a group of parishioners who said, we will do the one thing that Jesus asked us to do regarding vocations. We will ask the Lord to send out laborers for the harvest. And in our parish, we now have one gentleman in formation for the priesthood, diocesan priesthood, one who is actively discerning religious life. We have a gentleman in formation for the diaconate, and we went from having none in formation to having 3 in formation right after we started asking the Lord to bless this particular ministry. In the parish, there's a ministry called the Seven Sisters Ministry. So these are 7 women in the parish who have committed themselves for 1 year to praying for me as the pastor. So they each take a different day of the week, and they offer a holy hour for me. I can't tell you how life-giving it is to know that the good faith of these people is being prayed on my behalf. And now that we have an associate pastor, there's a second group of 7 sisters that are praying for him. There have been a number of different intercessory prayer teams set up in order to ask the Lord to bless the ministries of our parish. So where do we start in terms of forming division and revitalization and renewal in our parishes? And how do we build up groups of volunteers to help us in the work that's been entrusted to us? We ask the Lord. It starts there. And it's something that everyone can do, particularly those people who feel like they have nothing left to give in your parish. Maybe they're older or not as able as they used to be. They can and will and should pray. How much time do we have? Oh, that's it. So I'll leave you with this question. Forget this scenario, but I'm going to leave you with this question. I think it's good. At the end of this year, so at the end of this academic year, so by June, what will success have looked like for you in your ministry? What will success have looked like for you in your ministry? Well, thank you very much, everybody.